Silence is a weapon rarely understood by empires accustomed to the roar of conquest. When the Galactic Assembly issued their arrogant ultimatum, they fully expected humanity to break, to beg for scraps. Instead, the Earth delegation simply packed their briefcases and walked out. The universe has been holding its breath ever since. Ambassador Rhett Halstead sat motionless in the center of the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council, a sprawling, cavernous amphitheater constructed from a bioluminescent stone native to the Council's capital world, Xylar. The lighting was harsh, casting long, dramatic shadows across the tiered seating where thousands of delegates from over 400 species murmured and gossiped. Halstead's tailored charcoal suit, woven with subtle carbon nanotube threading, a proprietary blend developed by the Lockheed Boeing conglomerate back on Earth, felt increasingly heavy under the oppressive gaze of the galaxy's elite. To his left sat General Alondro Flores, a man whose stern, weathered face bore the scars of the Europa uprisings, wearing the crisp, dark blue uniform of the United Nations Space Command. To his right was Dr. Eleanor Bryce, the foremost astrophysicist from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, whose recent breakthroughs in dark matter manipulation had put humanity on the interstellar map. Together, they represented the entirety of the human race. They were a young species, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 3 decades prior thanks to a serendipitous discovery in the Oort cloud. Yet, in that short time, humanity had rapidly expanded, securing 36 star systems and building an industrial base that rivaled empires 10 times their age. This rapid expansion had terrified the Galactic Council. High Minister Valek, the towering, four-armed representative of the Telleri Ascendancy, the de facto rulers of the Council, stood at the central podium. Valek's species was ancient, highly advanced, and deeply entrenched in their belief that they were the absolute arbiters of order in the cosmos. For the past 4 hours, Valek had been dictating the terms of the Sol Pacification Treaty, a document that was less of a peace agreement and more of a total subjugation of the human race. Section 4, Article 12. Valek droned, his voice translated perfectly into English by the Neuralink earpieces worn by the human delegation. The planetary body known as Earth, and its subsidiary colonies, shall immediately cease all independent military manufacturing. The corporate entities identified in your registries as Raytheon, General Dynamics, and SpaceX must transfer all intellectual property and orbital shipyards to the jurisdiction of the Council's Oversight Committee within 30 standard cycles. Halstead did not blink. He kept his hands neatly folded on the polished obsidian table in front of him. Furthermore, Valek continued, his multiple eyes narrowing with barely concealed disdain, the Sol system will dismantle the orbital defense grids currently stationed around your designated gas giants, Jupiter and Saturn. These weapons present a destabilizing threat to the surrounding sectors. In exchange, the Galactic Council will provide a detachment of Telleri peacekeepers to ensure the security of human space. The cost of this peacekeeping force will be subsidized by a 40% tariff on all human exports of helium, 3 and refined neodymium. General Flores shifted in his seat, the leather creaking slightly. Halstead gently tapped his index finger against the table, a prearranged signal to remain silent. Flores' jaw tightened, but he maintained his military bearing. Doctor. Bryce, meanwhile, was rapidly scrolling through data on her transparent tablet, her expression one of mild amusement rather than outrage. The terms were absurd. They were demanding that humanity voluntarily disarm itself, surrender its most advanced corporations, and pay for the privilege of being occupied by alien forces. It was a complete surrender of sovereignty, dressed up in diplomatic legalese. We recognize that your species is newly emerged from your cradle, Valek said, adopting a tone of patronizing benevolence. You've achieved much with crude combustion and primitive fission, but the galaxy is a dangerous place, Ambassador Halstead. Your reckless expansion into the Cygnus Arm has alarmed the older, more civilized races. We are offering you a place within our order. A subordinate place, naturally, until your species can demonstrate the emotional and cultural maturity required of full council members. Whispers of agreement rippled through the amphitheater, The avian Kalan delegates clacked their beaks in approval, while the reptilian Moreth representatives hissed their endorsement. They were all in on it. The council was a cartel, and they had recognized humanity's booming economy and rapid technological advancement as a direct threat to their monopoly on galactic power. They fully expected Halstead to grovel, to attempt to negotiate the tariff down to 30%, or perhaps beg to keep a fraction of their defense grid. That was how it had always worked. Every young race that had stumbled onto the galactic stage had been bullied, economically crippled, and absorbed as a client state. Halstead thought back to the briefings he had received in Geneva just 3 weeks prior. The president of the United Earth Directorate, a pragmatic former CEO from the private sector named Thomas Arrington, had looked Halstead dead in the eye and given him his marching orders. "They're going to try to put a leash on us, Rhett," Arrington had said, pacing across the Oval Office equivalent in the UN headquarters. "They look at us and see a rabid dog that needs to be chained. But they don't understand our supply chains, they don't understand our production capabilities, and more importantly, they have absolutely no idea what Eleanor Bryce found out in the Kepler sector. You go there, you listen to their demands, and if they cross the line, you execute Protocol Vanguard." Halstead brought his focus back to the present. Valek was finally winding down his monologue, and failure to ratify this treaty by the conclusion of this session will result in immediate economic sanctions, a total blockade of the Sol system by the Grand Fleet, and the classification of humanity as a rogue species, Valek concluded, resting his lower hands on the podium while his upper hands steepled in a gesture of supreme authority. "The Council eagerly awaits your gratitude, Ambassador." The immense chamber fell dead silent. Tens of thousands of alien eyes focused on the tiny human delegation sitting at the center of the floor. The atmospheric pressure in the room seemed to drop. The trap had been sprung. The Council had placed a metaphorical gun to Earth's head in front of the entire known universe. Halstead slowly inhaled, filling his lungs with the heavily filtered, slightly ozone-scented air of the alien space station. He looked to his left. General Flores gave a microscopic nod. He looked to his right. "Doctor." Bryce locked her screen, the device emitting a soft, final chirp. "Hi, Minister Valek." Halstead's voice boomed through the chamber's translation matrix. He did not stand up. He did not raise his voice. His tone was conversational, almost bored. "To clarify, you are demanding the total dissolution of the United Earth military apparatus, the hostile takeover of our private aerospace sector, and a 40% tax on our core energy exports. We are offering you salvation from your own destructive tendencies," Valek corrected smoothly. "It is a generous offer. The Morath were required to pay 60% when they joined." "I see," Halstead replied. Minutes ticked by in agonizing silence. The alien delegates began to shift uncomfortably. They were waiting for the bargaining to begin. They were waiting for the desperate pleas about humanity's struggling colonies, the appeals to galactic mercy, the frantic attempts to compromise. Halstead did nothing of the sort. He reached down to the floor, picked up his sleek black polycarbonate briefcase manufactured by Samsonite, reinforced with military-grade ablative armor, and placed it on the obsidian table. Click. Clack. The sharp, mechanical sounds of the briefcase's titanium latches snapping open echoed loudly across the silent amphitheater. It was a stark, alien noise in a room dominated by biological hums and soft murmurs. Halstead calmly gathered his physical notes. He stacked the paper documents, a deliberate anachronism he often used to unnerve alien diplomats who relied entirely on holographics, and tapped them perfectly square against the table. He placed them neatly inside the briefcase. General Flores followed suit. The decorated military veteran stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the stone floor. He adjusted his service cap, squaring it on his head, and buttoned his uniform jacket. "Doctor." Bryce stood up as well, slipping her datapad into her lab coat pocket. The murmurs in the gallery ceased entirely. A palpable wave of confusion washed over the assembly. Valek leaned forward, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly in succession. "Ambassador Halstead?" Valek's voice crackled through the translation matrix, losing some of its previous aristocratic smoothness. "What are you doing? The session has not been adjourned." Halstead closed the lid of his briefcase. Snap, snap. The latches locked into place. The sound was like 2 gunshots in the quiet room. Halstead picked up the briefcase, stepped out from behind the table, and looked up at the towering Teleri High Minister. High Minister Valek, members of the Council, Halstead said, his voice crystal clear. The United Earth Directorate declines your offer. Valek's jaw dropped slightly, exposing a row of serrated teeth. You decline? Ambassador, you do not possess the authority to simply decline. Did your translation matrix malfunction? If you reject these terms, you will be blockaded. Your economy will collapse. Your people will starve within a generation. Our translation matrix is functioning perfectly, Minister, Halstead replied, his expression hardening into a mask of pure, unadulterated human defiance. We understood every word, and our answer is no. We will not dismantle our defense grids, we will not hand over our private industries to a foreign body, and we certainly will not pay you a tariff to occupy our home. Then you choose war, shouted a Morath delegate from the third tier, his reptilian scales flushing a deep, angry crimson. You choose annihilation. The Grand Fleet will burn your shipyards to ash. Halstead didn't even look at the Morath. He kept his eyes locked on Valek. We came here today in good faith. We came to offer a partnership, but it is abundantly clear that the Galactic Council is not looking for partners. You are looking for pets. Humanity has spent the last 200 years breaking the chains of our own gravity, surviving our own near extinction, and conquering the void. We did not cross the stars to put on a new collar. Halstead turned to his colleagues. General Doctor, let's go. We have a flight to catch. Without another word, Ambassador Rhett Halstead, General Alondro Flores, and Dr. Eleanor Bryce turned their backs on the most powerful political body in the known universe. They began to walk down the long, central aisle toward the massive exit doors. The chamber erupted into absolute pandemonium. Alien delegates were on their feet, shouting in hundreds of different languages. The translation matrix overloaded, emitting a chaotic static of overlapping threats, insults, and expressions of sheer disbelief. No one had ever walked out on the council. It was physically impossible to their minds. The council was the sun around which the galaxy revolved. To walk away was to step into a freezing void of inevitable death. Halt! Valek bellowed over the amplification system, his voice shaking the stone walls. Ambassador Halstead, if you walk through those doors, diplomatic immunity is revoked. You will be declaring yourselves enemies of the Council. You will not survive this. Halstead didn't break his stride. Flores marched beside him, his boots clicking rhythmically, deliberately, against the floor. Dr. Bryce didn't even look back. The heavy, ornate doors of the Grand Chamber loomed ahead. Two massive armored guards of the Krog species crossed their energy pikes, blocking the exit. Flores didn't slow down. He marched directly toward the guards, his eyes locked onto theirs with the cold, dead stare of a predator that had survived the bloody trenches of the Martian Civil War. The human didn't flinch. At the last possible second, intimidated by the sheer irrational confidence of the bipedal ape marching toward them, the Krog guard stepped aside, the pikes uncrossed. The massive doors hissed open, revealing the sleek, metallic corridors of the human embassy wing. The Earth delegation walked through. The doors slid shut behind them with a heavy, final thud, cutting off the chaotic roar of the council chamber. Inside the chamber, Valek stood frozen at his podium. The noise of the delegates slowly died down, replaced by a stunned, heavy silence. The humans hadn't negotiated. They hadn't begged. They hadn't even raised their voices in anger. They had simply treated the Galactic Council as if it were completely, utterly irrelevant. Fools, Valek finally whispered to himself. They have condemned themselves to the dark. But deep within his chest, beneath his secondary heart, Valek felt a strange, cold knot of unease forming. Empires did not survive by ignoring threats. But the humans hadn't acted like a cornered animal. They had acted like someone who knew a secret. 3 hours after the walkout, the grand diplomatic halls of Xylar were still buzzing with outraged energy. High Minister Valek sat in his private sanctum, sipping a glass of fermented nectar to soothe his nerves. He was surrounded by his top military advisors, including Fleet Commander Xylar Kor, who was already drawing up holographic tactical maps of the Sol system. It will take a standard week to mobilize the 1st and 3rd Armadas, Commander Kor grunted, pointing a thick digit at the blue sphere of Earth. Their orbital defenses, these Lockheed grids, are robust, but they rely on outdated kinetic barriers. We will overwhelm them with plasma barrages from outside their effective range. Do not underestimate them, Commander, Valek murmured, staring into his glass. The humans are industrious. They built a Dyson swarm around their star in less than 40 years. Their industrial output is terrifying. They are cornered prey, Kor scoffed. They walked out to save their pride. They will be back at the negotiating table before the week is out, begging for the very treaty they just rejected. An abrupt chime interrupted the meeting. The heavy blast doors of the sanctum slid open, and a junior intelligence officer stumbled into the room, his gills flaring with panic. "Hi, Minister! Forgive the intrusion, but it's the humans!" Valek sat up, a smug smile crossing his face. "Ah, they have returned already? Let them wait in the antechamber for a few hours. Let them sweat." "No, Minister," the officer stammered, holding up a data pad with trembling hands. "They haven't returned. They're gone." Valek frowned. "Gone? You mean they have retreated to their embassy?" "No, sir. I mean they are gone. The entire human embassy has been evacuated. The staff, the security personnel, the data servers, everything. They boarded their diplomatic cruiser, the UNSC Churchill, and broke orbit 20 minutes ago." Commander Kor laughed a deep, guttural sound. "Running back to their home system. Cowards." "Sir, you don't understand," the officer said, his voice cracking. "They didn't jump to the Sol system. We tracked their slipspace rupture. They jumped toward the Perseus Veil, into the deep unknown, and before they left, they broadcast a system-wide message to all our relay stations." Valek stood up, slamming his glass down on the desk. "Play it!" The officer tapped his screen. A holographic projection of Ambassador Rhett Halstead appeared in the center of the room. He was sitting on the bridge of his ship, the stars streaking past the viewport behind him. He looked entirely relaxed. "Hi, Minister Valek." "Members of the Council," Halstead's recorded voice echoed in the sanctum. "By the time you receive this, the human delegation will be beyond your tracking range. We did not come to Xylar to negotiate our survival. We came to negotiate yours." Valek's eyes widened. Kor stopped laughing. 2 years ago, Halstead continued, "Dr. Eleanor Bryce and our deep space reconnaissance fleets detected an anomaly in the intergalactic void, moving toward our galaxy at faster-than-light speeds. It is an extragalactic biological swarm, a locust-like entity of immense proportions. It consumes biomass, strips atmospheres, and leaves nothing but dead rocks in its wake. We call it the Scourge." The hologram shifted, displaying a terrifying tactical map. It showed a massive black mass approaching the outer rim of the galaxy directly in the path of the Teleri Ascendancy and the Council's core worlds. The mass was larger than 100 star systems combined. "Earth has known about this for 24 months, Halstead said, his image returning to the projection. "We spent that time adapting. Raytheon and General Dynamics didn't build our orbital grids to fight you, Minister. They built them to fight the Scourge. Our dark matter shielding, our temporal distortion fields, our kinetic barriers, they are designed specifically to repel this entity. We have fortified our sector. We are safe." A cold sweat broke out across Valek's scales. "We came to the Council today to offer you the blueprints," Halstead said, his tone devoid of pity. "We came to integrate our shielding technology into your fleets. We came to stand shoulder to shoulder with the galaxy to fight the apocalypse. But to do that, we needed you to treat us as equals. We needed to know you would fight beside us, not shoot us in the back to maintain your pathetic political dominance." Halstead leaned forward, staring directly into the camera. "You demanded our surrender. You demanded our disarmament. You proved that you are too blinded by your own arrogance to be trusted with the survival of our species. So, we are leaving you to your fate. The Scourge will hit your outer colonies in exactly 42 standard hours. May whatever gods you pray to have mercy on you, because humanity will not." The hologram flickered and died, leaving the room in stunned, absolute silence. Commander Kor stared at the empty space where the projection had been, his jaw slack. The tactical map on his own table suddenly updated with data downloaded from the human transmission. Red warning sirens began to blare throughout the sanctum. Deep space telemetry relays, stationed at the edge of the galaxy, were suddenly going dark, one by one. Goddess above, Kor whispered, his voice devoid of all its previous bravado. The outer relays, they're disappearing. Valek stumbled backward, collapsing into his chair. His mind raced, desperately trying to comprehend the sheer magnitude of their colossal mistake. The humans hadn't walked out because they were afraid of the Council. They had walked out because the Council was already dead, and Earth had no intention of sinking with the ship. Recall the fleets, Valek choked out, his chest heaving with panic. Recall all fleets to the capital. Send a transmission to the humans. Beg them to return. Offer them anything. Offer them my seat on the Council. We can't, sir, the intelligence officer cried. The humans severed all quantum entanglement comms. They've closed their borders. Their sector of space is entirely dark. They've locked the doors and thrown away the key. High Minister Valek looked at the sprawling, beautiful city of Xylar outside his window. A city that had stood for 10,000 years. A city that was now directly in the path of an ancient, cosmic horror. In their desperation to control the newest, brightest star in the galaxy, the Galactic Council had just extinguished their only source of light. And out in the cold void of space, the United Earth fleets raised their shields, locked their massive corporate-forged cannons, and prepared to weather the storm alone. Red emergency lights bathed the Teleri High Command Center in an apocalyptic glow. High Minister Valek stood paralyzed before the central holographic projector, watching a horror story unfold in real time. The projection, once a proud display of the Galactic Council's sprawling territorial dominance, was now a rapidly shrinking pocket of blue light, aggressively being devoured by an expanding tide of absolute black. Exactly 42 hours after Ambassador Rhett Halstead had issued his chilling warning, the Scourge arrived. It did not attack like a conventional army. There were no declarations of war, no strategic flanking maneuvers, and no demands for territory. It was a localized manifestation of cosmic entropy. Deep space imaging relays had managed to transmit a few fragmented visual feeds before being consumed, and what they showed shattered the sanity of the alien analysts. The Scourge was a biomechanical swarm, comprised of billions of jagged, asymmetrical entities that ranged from the size of fighter craft to the mass of small moons. They rode the interstellar solar winds like a plague of locusts, stripping star systems of everything biological matter, processed metals, and even the ambient energy of local stars. Commander Xylar Kor leaned heavily against the tactical console, his previous arrogance entirely evaporated. His uniform, usually immaculate, was rumpled, and his 4 eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. "Report from the Perseus Border Commander," a junior officer announced, his voice trembling so violently it was barely intelligible through the translation matrix. The Third Armada engaged the vanguard of the swarm at the edge of the SETI Alpha system. "Show me," Kor rasped. The main projector shifted from a galactic overview to a localized tactical grid. Thousands of green icons, representing the pride of the Council's military sleek, aerodynamic plasma cruisers and dreadnoughts, were arrayed in a defensive formation against a wall of black static. The engagement lasted less than 6 minutes. Minute 1. The Council ships unleashed a synchronized barrage of plasma torpedoes, illuminating the void with blinding blue fire. The swarm did not evade. The plasma impacted the leading edge of the Scourge, melting millions of the smaller entities into slag. Minute 2. The swarm rapidly adapted. The larger, moon-sized constructs deployed vast organic webbing that acted as a thermal sink. The subsequent plasma volleys were absorbed, dispersed, and effectively neutralized. Minute 4. The Scourge closed the distance. They did not fire weapons, they simply crashed into the Council fleet. The entities clamped onto the hulls of the dreadnoughts, their biomechanical jaws chewing through the reinforced tritanium armor. Minute 6. The green icons flickered, turned yellow, and vanished. All life signs ceased. The Third Armada, a force that had policed 100 star systems for 3 millennia, was gone. Silence descended upon the High Command Center. Valek felt his knees weaken. He collapsed into his command chair, his hands trembling. "They ate them," Kor whispered, staring at the empty tactical grid. "Our shields. The plasma just fed them. They consumed the kinetic barriers, they consumed the ships, they consumed the crews." "Minister!" another analyst shouted. We have reports coming in from the Morath homeworld. The swarm has bypassed their planetary defense cannons. The atmosphere is being stripped. The Morath delegate is begging for immediate evacuation. Valek closed his eyes. The Morath had been the loudest advocates for humanity's subjugation just 2 days ago. Now, their civilization was being erased from the cosmos. There is no evacuation, Valek said, his voice hollow. Where would they go? The swarm is moving inward, towards the core worlds, towards Xylar. Desperation, raw and unfiltered, gripped the room. The galactic elite, species that had spent thousands of years convinced of their absolute superiority, were discovering that the universe did not care about their politics, their treaties, or their heritage. They were merely food. What about the humans? Kor suddenly demanded, turning to Valek. Halstead said they fortified their sector. He said they built a wall. We cannot reach them, the communications officer replied. All quantum entanglement channels to the Sol system remain severed. We have sent automated distress beacons on every known frequency. There is no response. Send a stealth courier, Kor ordered, slamming his fist onto the console. A fast attack scout. Have it jump as close to the Sol border as possible. We need to know if they survived. We need to know if their defenses actually work. If they do, we abandon the Outer Rim and retreat our surviving fleets behind their lines. Valek didn't argue. He nodded slowly. Do it. But Kor, what makes you think they will let us in? They are a young species, Kor growled, though his tone lacked conviction. They have empathy. They will not watch the galaxy burn. 3 hours later, the stealth courier Shadowwing dropped out of slipspace at the absolute edge of human territory, near the Oort cloud of the Sol system. The visual feed from the courier was transmitted live to the High Command Center on Xylar. When the visual cleared, a collective gasp echoed through the Teleri bunker. The Sol system was unrecognizable. It was no longer a simple star system with orbiting planets. It was a fortress of unimaginable scale. Earth's corporations. The very entities Valek had demanded be surrendered to the Council had been incredibly busy. Encasing the entire solar system was a faintly shimmering violet energy field. It was a dark matter displacement grid, powered by the immense energy harvested from the Dyson swarm surrounding their sun. The grid was punctuated by colossal, heavily armored defense stations, each easily the size of a Council dreadnought, bristling with weaponry that defied Council understanding. As the Teleri scout ship drifted closer, the dark matter field flared aggressively. A mechanized, pre-recorded broadcast flooded the scouts' communication channels, immediately translated into the Teleri language. You have entered the sovereign territory of the United Earth Directorate. This perimeter is currently under Level 1 quarantine due to the impending hostile biological incursion. Turn back immediately. Any vessel attempting to breach the Aegis Wall will be destroyed without further warning. May God be with you. Sir? The courier pilot's voice crackled over the feed. I am picking up localized swarm elements approaching the human barrier. A splinter group of the Scourge. Massive biomass. They are attempting to consume the human energy field. Valek leaned forward, holding his breath. On the visual feed, thousands of the jagged, black entities hurled themselves at the violet shield, protecting human space. Unlike the Council's plasma barriers, the human shield did not feed the swarm. The moment the biomechanical horrors touched the dark matter field, they experienced localized temporal distortion. The entities rapidly aged, their biological components decaying into dust in a fraction of a second, while their mechanical parts shattered into inert fragments. The defense stations then opened fire. They did not use plasma. They fired accelerated beams of pure, weaponized dark matter technology born from the brilliant mind of Dr. Eleanor Bryce. The beams tore through the void, completely ignoring conventional physics, and struck the remaining swarm entities. The Scourge didn't just die. They were unraveled at a molecular level, erased from existence. In less than 40 seconds, the splinter swarm was annihilated. The violet shield shimmered, completely unaffected, and returned to its dormant state. By the ancestors, Kor breathed. It works. Their technology. It completely neutralizes the Scourge. Pilot, Valek ordered desperately. Transmit an emergency override code. Tell them the High Minister of the Galactic Council requests immediate asylum. Tell them we will sign any treaty, agree to any terms. Before the pilot could acknowledge the order, a single, concentrated beam of kinetic force shot from one of the human defense stations. It didn't strike the scout ship, but rather clipped its slip-space engine, cleanly disabling its faster-than-light capabilities without destroying the vessel. The automated human voice returned, cold and indifferent. Warning. Aggressive maneuver logged. Retreat to minimum safe distance on impulse engines. The United Earth Directorate is closed. Good luck. The visual feed cut to static. The High Command Center fell dead silent once more. The humans had not just survived, they had conquered the apocalypse. And they had absolutely no intention of sharing their salvation with the empires that had tried to enslave them. Valek stared at the static, the crushing weight of his arrogance finally breaking his spirit. He had demanded humanity surrender its shield, and now he was going to die outside it. Time was a luxury the Galactic Council no longer possessed. Within 5 standard days, the Scourge had consumed 60% of the known galaxy. The Kalan aviaries were gone, their majestic floating cities digested into biological paste. The Morath hegemony was a graveyard of stripped, lifeless rocks. The remnants of the Council's grand fleet had retreated to the skies above Xylar, forming a desperate, pathetic ring of steel around the capital world. High Minister Valek stood on the balcony of his grand palace, looking up at the sky. It was midday, but the sun was barely visible. The atmosphere was choked with the shadows of the approaching swarm. Millions of the jagged entities had already entered the upper stratosphere, blotting out the light, descending like a terrible, suffocating blanket of death. Anti-aircraft batteries fired continuously from the city below, tracing useless lines of blue plasma into the descending darkness. The screams of the populace echoed through the golden spires. It was the end of an era. The death of a 10,000-year-old political dynasty, extinguished by a mindless, cosmic hunger. Valek closed his eyes, preparing for the inevitable strike. Suddenly, the air pressure dropped violently. The ambient temperature plummeted, and a sound like tearing metal echoed across the entire sky. Valek opened his eyes. Directly above the capital city, massive tears in the fabric of spacetime ripped open. They were not standard slip-space ruptures. They were jagged, bleeding wounds in reality, shimmering with violent violet energy. From within these tears, leviathans emerged. They were not the sleek, elegant ships of the Galactic Council. They were brutal, utilitarian monstrosities, constructed of dark gray carbon plating and heavy titanium armor. They bore the stark, unadorned logos of Earth's megacorporations and the bold lettering of the United Nations Space Command. At the center of the formation was a super dreadnought. So massive, its gravity temporarily disrupted the tides of Xylar's oceans. Painted on its hull in massive white letters was its name, UNSC Vanguard. The human fleet had arrived. Before the Teleri defenders could even register the new arrivals, the human ships engaged. General Alondro Flores, commanding from the bridge of the Vanguard, unleashed hell. The human fleet did not use plasma, and they did not hold back. Hundreds of defense platforms dropped from the underbellies of the dreadnoughts, immediately projecting interlocking dark matter shields over the Teleri capital, creating a dome of violet light just as the Scourge crashed down. The impact was catastrophic, but the shield held. The biomechanical horrors withered and shattered against Dr. Bryce's technology. Then, the Vanguard fired its primary weapon. A terrifyingly silent pulse of dark energy erupted from the ship's prow. The beam struck the densest concentration of the Scourge in orbit. The sky turned negative colors inverted, and sound was temporarily erased from the world. A massive shockwave of localized temporal distortion expanded outward. Millions of Scourge entities simply turned to dust, blowing away in the upper atmospheric winds. The human frigates broke formation, diving into the atmosphere like raptors, their kinetic railguns tearing through the surviving swarm clusters with ruthless, calculated efficiency. Valek watched in absolute awe. In less than 20 minutes, the skies above Xylar were cleared. The immediate threat was annihilated, and the surviving swarm entities in orbit were rapidly retreating from the system, repelled by the very presence of the dark matter weaponry. A communication channel forcibly opened on Valek's personal terminal, overriding all Council security encryptions. The holographic projector flickered to life, and Ambassador Rhett Halstead appeared. He was no longer wearing his charcoal suit. He wore a crisp utilitarian UNSC officer's uniform, devoid of medals but heavy with authority. High Minister Valek, Halstead said, his tone as calm and collected as it had been on the day he walked out of the council chamber. Ambassador Halstead, Valek choked out, falling to his knees before the hologram, completely discarding his pride. You came. You saved us. The council. We owe you everything. We were wrong. We were arrogant, blind fools. Get up, Valek, Halstead commanded, his voice cold. Don't insult me with groveling. Wylick shakily rose to his feet. We did not come back out of the goodness of our hearts, Halstead continued, stepping forward in the projection. We ran the simulations. If the Scourge consumed the biomass of the core worlds, their critical mass would eventually overwhelm even our Aegis wall. It was a matter of tactical necessity to break their momentum here. Halstead picked up a sleek black datapad from off-screen. However, seeing as humanity has just expended billions of credits in dark matter munitions, and given that our corporations will need to establish permanent planetary defense grids across your remaining territories to ensure this doesn't happen again, we find ourselves in need of compensation. Valek's four eyes widened. He realized exactly what was happening. I have a document here, Halstead said smoothly, tapping the screen. We call it the Sol Ascendancy Treaty. It stipulates that the Galactic Council will immediately dissolve its current oversight committees. The Teleri Ascendancy will surrender command of all remaining naval assets to the United Nations Space Command. Furthermore, a 70% tariff will be placed on all core world exports to subsidize the human peacekeeping forces that will now occupy your space. It was verbatim. It was the exact, crushing subjugation treaty Valek had tried to force upon humanity, magnified and turned back upon him like a mirror. You are taking control of the council, Valek whispered, a cold dread washing over him. You are making us a client state. We are offering you salvation from your own destructive tendencies, Minister, Halstead replied, throwing Valek's own patronizing words back at him. It is a generous offer. The alternative is we pack up our shields and leave you to the second wave of the Scourge. I assure you, they will be back. Valek looked out at the sky. The violet dome of human engineering protected his city. The massive, brutalist ships of the UNSC hovered above, an undeniable display of absolute power. The old galaxy was dead. The age of the Council was over. Humanity had not just survived the storm, they had become it. Where do I sign? Valek asked. His voice defeated, hollow, and completely broken. Halstead smiled a terrifying, predatory human smile. I'll send down a shuttle. Dr. Bryce has the physical copies. We require your signature in person. After all, it's only proper diplomacy. The hologram flickered out, leaving Valek alone on his balcony. He looked up at the Vanguard, realizing too late that the most dangerous thing in the universe was not the monsters lurking in the dark, but the quiet, unassuming apes who knew how to build a bigger cage. The universe learned a terrifying lesson that day. Arrogance is a luxury only the truly prepared can afford. Humanity didn't just walk away from the table. They flipped it, rebuilt it, and forced the galaxy to sit in the child's seat. If you loved this epic tale of human defiance and HFY justice, smash that like button, share this story with your fellow sci-fi fans, and subscribe for more thrilling cosmic adventures. What would you have done in Halstead's shoes? Let us know below.
Hi, my name is Tran Trong, the owner and manager of Palace Truths. After watching the video, Wait, They're Leaving, the Galactic Council froze when humanity abandoned the talks, _HFYSCI, I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? For me, the strongest feeling was quiet satisfaction. Instead of reacting with anger or desperation, humanity chose confidence, patience, and long-term thinking. The story reminded me that real strength isn't always about winning the loudest argument. Sometimes it's knowing your values, preparing well, and being willing to walk away from a bad deal. Which moment stood out to you the most? The human delegation leaving the council chamber, the reveal of the greater threat, or the final return to help on humanity's own terms? If you had been in Halstead's position, would you have made the same decision? One lesson I took from this story is that self-respect and preparation often matter more than seeking approval. In everyday life, knowing when to stand firm can open better opportunities than giving in to pressure. If this story gave you something to think about, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy HFY stories that blend strategy, resilience, and big sci-fi ideas, feel free to like the video or subscribe if you'd like to see more.